wow, didn't realize how tough this job was. I didn't realize how complex the University of Minnesota is, or Mankato, or Moorhead. I didn't realize how indifferent people are to what I really did in Iraq. I was at the epicenter of world events. I come home and everybody says, how was it? Was it hot? Think we should be there? And that's the sum total of what they want to know, and they don't want long answers. 22 months boiled down to sound bites. And that startling realization that, there are very few people that understand where I've been. And a kind of a loneliness sets in, and even a social alienation. And then I find that lasts for a period of time. For the healthiest soldiers, they work through that. A couple months beyond that, and they're engaged in their normal activities. But for some, it persists because they're not able to re-engage. So honeymoon, realization of reality, some disillusionment, some alienation, and then re-engagement with society.
And Dr. LeBlanc, since you have personal experience in Iraq, does any of this ring true on a personal level? People asking you how hot it was, how windy, how dirty, or versus what you actually went through?
They're typically very short conversations. And Chaplain Morris is right. They don't know quite what to ask, and they have some specific questions, but for the most part it's very general, and then the questions asked. What Chaplain Morris is also talking about is that life in the military in a lot of ways is pretty simple. You get orders and you give orders, and we don't have nearly the level of complexity that we have and you have on a daily basis in the civilian world. And so that is one of the main reasons for all of the adjustment issues.
Then how can friends and family be supportive through this? Do you have any good advice?
I work with this on a regular basis, and like Dr. LeBlanc, I was in Iraq and all over the Middle East. What I say to families is, take time to ask questions and sit there for the answer. Let me take the lead in what it is I would like to do and what it is I really need. My silly example is a common example. A lot of families plan big celebrations when their soldier comes home, assuming that's what the soldier wants. And I'm very confident I'm accurate here. 80% of the soldiers want a very quiet welcome home and time to regain space, because we've been living in an austere environment with no freedom, no personal space, and being overwhelmed by people that we didn't get to select is overwhelming. To re-engage life at our pace, to do the things we want to do, and for families not to feel alienated that, no, we don't want to see the extended family, most of us, immediately. Or if we do want to see them, we'd like to be in a place where we could leave and it doesn't end the party. Most people bring that party right into our house and we're trapped. We can't leave. And families then are hurt when the soldier disappears. Overwhelmed. Overwhelmed from the start. And then I always say to people, if you're going to share your foreign policy opinion, ask me if it's okay first. What I find is a lot of people will do what I call verbal aikido. They'll ask us how it was in Afghanistan, Iraq, and just as we start to say, they flip on us and say, but I don't think we should be there, or I think we should be there, or whatever. Well, that isn't what the question first offered was. The question was, what was my experience like? You'll find most of us don't want to talk about foreign policy. And there's a variety of reasons for that. We do want to share our experience. As soon as we sense, though, that you're waning in interest, we're going to start shutting down. And it doesn't take most of us more than a week to realize we're probably never going to tell this story. It's going to be with us the rest of our lives, but nobody's really going to hear it all.
Well, it's really sad.
It is, but you can check all generations of veterans, that's true. And of course, the more horrific the experience that we had, the less likely we're going to tell anybody.
Then as a medical professional, how do you reach out to someone to maybe get them to tell those stories? Because it's a form of healing to do that.
One of the things that we emphasize in all of our reintegration programs is talks exactly like this, to first of all normalize the experience, to say, look, this is what everybody is experiencing, and that's a normal thing. Another thing that Minnesota has done is to put healthcare providers, and specifically mental health care providers, right into the armories. And so that when soldiers show up for duty, these folks are available, both to the soldiers and their families, to discuss exactly those issues.
Can someone ever be fully reintegrated into society after seeing combat?
We certainly hope so, although, as Chaplain Morris will often say, and you also said, there is no normal. It's a new normal. And we certainly hope that the majority of our soldiers, and we anticipate that they will reintegrate and they'll just be fine. They will never be the same. You all are changed by combat. And it's just to the level of degree and how much it may affect you on a daily basis.
Chaplain Morris, a comment to that?
Most are changed for the better, and that's something that we often overlook. And Ken Burns is running this beautiful series on World War II. The greatest generation was changed for the better by the horrific cauldron of World War II. This generation will be the same. You know, in this brigade combat team coming home, we're bringing home future neurosurgeons, governors, social workers, people leveraging what they experienced in combat to go on and be more productive citizens. And so I always tell people, please don't assume that we're victims. The other thing I think would surprise most people is this is an all-volunteer Army, which means most of us, this is what we signed up to do, and we're proud we did it. And that pride provides a base from which to build the next chapter of our lives. I've seen this in all generations of veterans, and that's why you have veterans at the 4th of July and at Veterans Day. They're proud of what they did. They went to an austere place, did something others couldn't do, and in our case tried to offer freedom to people who were visibly oppressed. And that brings something back to life that Minnesota will be richly blessed by. So the minority of us that have very, very serious problems deserve all the attention we can give them. But let's not fail to harness the tremendous things coming home for the good in the majority of these veterans.
I have to ask you again about a personal experience. You are a physician in the St. Cloud area, and you came back to that job. What was that like?
It's amazing. The difference between the two scenarios is so stark that once out of that area, you very rapidly sort of forget. I mean, it's easy to recall if you think about it, but because it is so different from your day-to-day experience, I would say that within about 2 weeks I was back to work, and it was like, gosh, did that ever really happen?
And that's going to feel a little strange too.
Particularly is strange when you're thinking about all your colleagues that are still there. As a physician, I only have to do 90 days at a time. I was there a bit longer, but still not nearly as long as those soldiers. And so I will tell you, I thought about them every day. Every news article, every report that came out, I held my breath. And of course, more and more so the closer they got to the end.
You know, an interesting thing I've noticed, Kathy, in medical professionals in Iraq and Afghanistan, high degree of job satisfaction, an amazing sense of importance in what they do because they're vital to the welfare of those soldiers. And they deal with life and death. And I've noticed in many of them coming home, there's nothing they can do in their personal medical practice that will ever equal being on the edge, as many of those doctors were in combat support hospitals and forward surgical centers. And how do they readjust? I've talked to many of them about, you know, how do you do that? And I've noticed a number of them volunteering to go back. There's nothing here that equals my sense of job satisfaction, meaning, and purpose as there is over there. I'm more needed there than I am here. It's an interesting outgrowth of this all-volunteer Army, and the great medical staff that's been assembled by the military does a stellar job forward. How do they come home and assume the practices they had? That'll be their personal challenge.
Do you find that also with other soldiers trained for a specific duty, and you get back home and maybe your job previous was working in a plant of some sort, or maybe for some soldiers it was at Burger King? You know, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we talk about that regularly. You know, having racing down the road in an up-armored Humvee with a 50 caliber machine gun, you don't get to do that at Walmart. And how do you replace that? And that is what this brigade's grappling with right now. And so here's what I see in our soldiers. 85% of our soldiers from Minnesota, when surveyed, said, I want to go back to college. So that's the way that generation is going to deal with that, not unlike the greatest generation. Hey, I want to make something different out of myself than what I was. We run job fairs at our reintegration event.